I'm delighted that you're there. Imagine if you weren't, I'd be talking to myself. That would be dreadful. And I hope you come back every week to Travel TV with Stephanie Abrams, because there's so much we need to talk about. You know, last week we had a question from one of our viewers, and it is such a powerful and important question that I promised I would go into more detail, or just a little bit more detail, because it's something we all need to understand well this week. Mark, can you reread that question, please?
Sure can, Stephanie. It was actually from Brad, and he was viewing it on KAZD in Dallas, Texas. And basically his question was, he had read that visitors to the United States have dropped, and he wanted to know what you thought about that. He said that there were only two countries that had a decline in visitorship. It was the U.S. and Turkey. So
all right.
What do you think?
We've had a couple of drops in visitors in recent history. One was right after 9/11. And for about 18 to 24 months after 9/11, between countries where a visa is required to come and visit us, who weren't getting those visas, and people that were afraid to go to an airport, travel plunged. You may be one of those people that didn't travel. And I actually went on the air for the first time with Travel with Stephanie Abrams on July 7, 2002. And we were in the midst of that big slump of people who were afraid to get in an airplane, go to an airport, go anywhere outside the US. And I can remember, at least for the first 18 months that I was on radio, I spent most of my time trying to motivate people to get up and go, because wherever you're listening to us, wherever you're watching us, whether you're watching TV in Boston or Atlanta or Miami or Houston or Dallas like Brad, or Honolulu or Los Angeles or Las Vegas, no matter where you are in the nation watching this show, I'm going to bet that you have some memory of thinking twice about traveling, and maybe not traveling for a good couple of years. And there was a period where after about 20 to 24 months, there was this big surge in travel, because there was all this pent-up energy of people who, they invented that word, staycation. You know there's no such thing. The only way to do a staycation is to find a really nice hotel in the neighborhood you live in and go check in there. Because if you stay home and go to the beach or the pool or the local museums or out to dinner, you're still getting up and dealing with making your bed and cleaning your bathroom and taking out your garbage and taking care of the dog. And what kind of vacation is that? So, and even business travelers, with the invention and proliferation of conferencing and being able through computers to talk to people on the other side of the world, people talk them out of going places. Well, one of the things businesses learned is you want the client, you want to keep the client, you want to move ahead with your supplier, your partner, you got to go face to face. That's really the only way to do it. And if you're going to have a meeting in your boardroom, I'm here to tell you the quantum leap idea, what I call the hula hoop idea, is not emerging in your conference room. And it's certainly not emerging when every few minutes somebody slips you a note, or today texts you and tells you about there's a crisis at the factory, or something's happening in administration. No. You need a change of scenery, you need the dust to settle, whether it's for your personal life or your business life. And this whole idea of travel, and should you be traveling, and when is the best time to travel, and can you get into America? when you're traveling. That's a big one. The traveler is such a boon to the economy. And on that subject, I have to tell you that when governments, whether they're local, municipal, state, or otherwise, provinces around the world, countries around the world, when they run into economic problems, one of the first things they do is they slash the tourism budget. I don't use this word often because I really think it's kind of an obscene word, but it's really stupid. It's really stupid. Tourism, for the most part, is a non-polluting industry where people come to you and your state, city, town, and they spend money in hotels and restaurants and shops and buying everything from rental cars to gasoline to get them around, or if they've driven to you in their own car, they're still going to be needing the services of some local gasoline stations. And then they go home, leaving money behind. Could you ask for a better gift in your community? And yet there are many communities, nationwide and worldwide, that see the visitor as kind of a pain in the neck, and they make it clear that we're glad you're here, we wish you'd go home. And last week I talked about my favorite island, and it's Ireland, and one of the reasons is you want to feel welcomed in a place, take your bones to Ireland. Céad Míle Fáilte is a motto you will see everywhere you go in Ireland, and in Irish, the translation in English is 100,000 welcomes. And by making it clear to much of the world that not the American people necessarily, but the American government is not going to make it easy for you to visit. If you come from a country where you need a visa to visit, not just a passport, you're probably not going to get that visa. You don't have a warm, snuggy, fuzzy feeling about coming to the US. And during that period in 2001, 2002, 2003, when we were making it difficult for people who wanted to come to the US for surgical procedures and the kind of surgery that we have specialists here that just don't exist in other parts of the world, or at least we didn't think did. The US was the destination of choice for people in foreign countries who needed the kind of dangerous surgery that requires doctors with the hands of angels. For people who want to come to the US and take advantage of the excellent medical services that are offered here, I'm 100% behind it. For Americans to go somewhere else in the world because it's cheaper to get a hip or a knee replacement, and maybe if you're paying for it yourself out of your pocket because your insurance isn't covering it, it looks, something that might be $80,000 here might be under $10,000 somewhere else in the world. But we're talking about people's lives here, and so I haven't been a great proponent of jumping on the bandwagon of that's the way to go. I would like to see papal dispensation, if you will, that allows people to get into the US who clearly have the documentation that somebody in the family needs these services. And you're talking back in 2003, when I went to the Department of Commerce symposium on this very subject of dwindling medical tourism, dwindling educational tourism. Medical tourism was worth billions every year. Educational tourism, where families bring their college student to settle their child into school, come back for mid-year, come back at the end of the year to bring their child home, and back again in September to start the new school year. That tourism, because those people are coming and utilizing hospitality services, in 2003-04 was worth $12 billion a year. But once we started monkeying around with what it takes to get a visa, the head of Georgetown University told a horror story about a professor who comes over every year, is here in the US for 10 months, goes home, maybe it's 9 months, goes back in like the end of May before graduation from college transpires, goes back to his country, he was from the Middle East, and comes back in September to start teaching again. Only in 2002, when he went home in end of May, beginning of June, he couldn't get back in. After 20 years of teaching at Georgetown, he couldn't get a visa to come back in to continue the school year, which monkeyed around with the system at not only Georgetown, this was a story rampant across America, where colleges suddenly had to go scrambling for people to teach courses who had been teaching those courses, who are revered professors for decades. Something's wrong. You know, I talked last week about the Global Entry Program. If you missed that episode, let me give you a quick synopsis. With Global Entry, which you can go online, put in GOES into, like GOES, G-O-E-S, into Google, you'll get links to Global Online Entry System. And just by filling out some forms online, you will be processed through. I will tell you now, if you have any kind of felony record, or you know your past history isn't a good one, the chances are good you're going to get a rejection. But for the average American who's been on the straight and narrow all their lives, as most Americans are, what's going to happen is you go through this process, you answer the questions, they move you up in the system, and over a period of a few weeks or a month, you will find out you have been offered an appointment to go to your local international airport that you would normally fly from if you were, or anyone for that matter. I mean, if you have to be traveling, you can make your appointment for when you're in Los Angeles or Dallas or Houston, even if you live in Boston. But went through this process in Boston. And for the date that we decided that we were going to go for the actual meeting where they scan your fingerprints that we talked about last week, we planned the appointment for 3 hours before our actual flight out of the country, so we did it all in one day. I'm going to tell you more about that after these important messages. Stay with me. Stephanie Abrams here. Stay with me. We'll be right back. You know, I was talking about this Global Entry Program. The purpose of the Global Entry Program is to give people who pass muster a free pass to zip through the passport control process, waiting in a line at any international airport in the US. And by the way, there are a couple of places where you clear customs flying from outside the US in. One of those places, actually, two of those places, are Dublin Airport and Shannon Airport in Ireland and Toronto. I'm sure you can find them if you go to state.gov.travel. Start with the word travel. Travel.state.gov. But you really want to know more about this global entry. And what it does is it allows you to bypass the process because you've already been cleared by the US government as a trusted traveler. And global entry started out to be for international when you come home. There's another program called Trusted Traveler Program, which is for travel within US airports. And if you're flying from New York to Miami or Boston to Fort Lauderdale or Atlanta to LA to LAX, you're gonna go through that process of take off your belt, take off your shoes, take your computer out, take that little zippy bag with a little sandwich size, quart size Ziploc bag that you put your liquids in. When you get Global Entry today, we're now on our second run with Global Entry. It's a 5-year deal. And it's very inexpensive, and when you divide it by 5, it comes out to like $20 a year or something like that. You don't have to take off your shoes, and you don't have to take off your belt, and you don't have to take your computer out of the case, and you don't have to even, you need to take your liquids in that little Ziploc bag, nothing more than 3 ounces. But you can leave it in the bag. So you still have to segregate them in a Ziploc bag, but you don't have to take it out of your case. And you get a special lane. So when there's 100 people in a line trying to get to the lanes where they're going to take off their shoes, and I got to the point I said, why do I bother to get dressed before I go to the airport? I might as well come in my bathrobe and bring a carry-on bag that I don't really carry on. I'm just going to stuff my bathrobe in it, because my clothes will be in there, and I'll get dressed after I go through, because by the time you're done with the shoes and the belt and the jacket and the sweater and you don't have to do that unless you are wearing a metal buckle on your belt that makes them crazy and they want you to take it off. Or you've got shoes that are that thick, and maybe they'll still, there's still the option that they may ask you to remove some items. But for the most part, that doesn't happen. And you have a special lane just for you, Bob, like that old car commercial where Bob had his own lane. Everybody was in line for tolls, but this was the lane for Bob. This is the lane for you. And it is so worth it. And if you don't fly that often, if you fly once in 5 years, trust me, it is so worth it to have this extra service that takes the harassment out of travel. And why do they do it? They do it because you're going to fill out the forms, and then you're going to go to the airport that you choose to have your personal interview, which takes about 10 minutes. And they're going to ask you a few innocuous questions, and then they're going to take your fingerprints. But this is not the old, let's ink you up at the police station fingerprint routine. You take first the 4 fingers of one hand, then the 4 fingers of the other hand, and you put them on something that looks like a copy machine. And they scan your fingerprints. And the reason they do both hands is just in case you happen to slip and fall and, do something silly to your fingers, or your hand, your arm is bandaged up and you can't lean over and put it on the scanning device. And instead of going in the line with all those 1,000 other people who've just landed, and if you fly into the East Coast from somewhere in Asia, or you fly into the West Coast from somewhere in Europe, maybe you were on a flight that was 10, 12, 15, 19 hours. You kind of had enough already of the day. So the last thing you need after you get off a long-haul flight is to go stand in a line. And it's very nice. It generally takes longer to walk over to the kiosk and put your fingers down and answer the questions you would have answered on that paper they give you for re-entry into the U.S. As I mentioned last week, things like, did you pet a horse? The questions about livestock. Were you on a farm? Are you carrying more than $10,000 in check or cash? Which is not illegal, but you do have to declare it. If you're carrying it and you don't declare it, somebody's going to want to sit down and talk to you. And then it'll ask you about, did you spend more than this or that? And when you're on a long-haul flight, often they don't give you those papers when you first get on the flight so you can fill it out now because you're probably going to fall asleep. No. They prefer to wake you up once you're asleep. So you want to make sure, if you get into the Global Entry program, that you let the flight attendants know Don't wake me up when you hand out those papers. I'm done. I have global entry. When I land, I go there. And you answer all the questions on the kiosk. You put your fingers down. There we go. Fingers down. You got that? Put our fingers down on the scanner. Don't wiggle your fingers around because you'll have to do it again. If you wiggle the second time, they're going to pull you off and go through another line. That's the whole point, is to avoid it. But the point is that not every traveler is a terrorist. Not every visitor to the United States is a terrorist or a threat. In fact, the average person coming to the U.S. coming long haul, these 12, 14, 18-hour flights, they spend 18 days in the U.S. on average. It's a big trip. You're going, you might as well stay. And on average, they leave behind $4,400 a person. So a couple coming long distance from somewhere, or business people coming long distance from somewhere, they're going to leave a nice chunk of change everywhere they go. Don't you think it'd be a good idea to make it easy for them, knowing that not every person who goes to an airport is there to do mischief? Most people are not. And if people are willing to give you their background information, and they're willing to do the fingerprint thing, we ought to be willing to let them come and visit, because we can check them out before they get here in depth. Stay with me, we'll be right back. People ask me about my favorite ways to travel, the things I like to do. I listen to people complain all the time. Well, actually, I don't listen. I'll be straight with you. I do my best not to listen. Because if you're finding traveling a hassle, you're doing it wrong. And over the next several weeks, we will be talking about how to travel richly, how to do it right. I haven't done anything I need to punish myself for. So if travel were miserable, the part that to get where you want to go, or while you're where you wanted to be, or getting back from where you wanted to be, why would I do that to myself? And I travel a lot. And I love it because I really know how, and I'm going to help you learn how to travel and travel richly, travel well, so that you return from places that you're going to learn about right here at Travel TV with Stephanie Abrams. Places that I believe if you go there and you partake of what they offer, you will come home enriched, enhanced, inspired, and uplifted, and somehow know you're a better person because of the experience you just had. And isn't that what it's all about? Even when you're traveling for business, especially when you're traveling for business, because there's nothing worse than spending your day under time pressure and the pressure of scoring, the pressure of getting what you came to do done, and done to your satisfaction. And then you need to unwind and relax, because if you don't, you're going to be spending a lot of time and money at the doctor's office. Because there's no question that there is a strong correlation between stress and just about every disease the body falls ill to. So investing in comfort, investing in a change of scenery, investing in feeling like you're living like the king should live, that's all worth it, because it will enrich and enhance your life. And one form of travel that I absolutely love is train travel. And I have done train travel in a variety of countries in Europe, and lots of Amtrak travel. And few weeks back, you may remember, or maybe the story got past you. There was a story that the United States officially disinvited people from Haiti, Belize, and Samoa, American Samoa, not to apply for visas because they weren't going to get them. And that was specifically aimed at farm worker visas. And all of that is sad for more reasons than I have time to go into today, but hey, we got the rest of the year to talk. What troubled me on two levels is that American Samoa is an American territory, and the only American territory where the residents and the people that are born there, live there, grow up there, are considered American nationals, not American citizens, whereas the people in Guam, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands, and prior to Hawaii becoming a state, these people were all citizens. Oh, you've heard that story, no doubt, right? About Hawaii and citizenship. So you're well versed on this. American Samoan people who are born there can only be citizens if one of their parents is a U.S. citizen. And I'm sure there's a path to citizenship. I don't know what it is particularly. It's probably the same path everybody else has to take. But it just seems odd that this one island nation, it's not a nation, territory, in the Pacific is just treated badly. And Samoans serve in the U.S. military. Samoans are subject to all the laws of the U.S., and they have U.S. passports, but they're not citizens and they don't vote. And that's a story we'll delve into another day. The reasons go back to the Spanish-American War, when the U.S. won and annexed Puerto Rico and American Samoa. It was just Samoa, became American Samoa. And I guess it was because the culture of the locals appeared to the elitists in government at that time as, I hate to use the word, but I mean, they saw them as savages. They saw them as uncivilized. Well, we now in the 21st century, that was in the 19th century. It's amazing that we have not progressed, and I feel for the people of Samoa. But I also feel for the people of Haiti. And it reminded me, I went looking, and I'm hoping for next week or the week after or sometime soon, I can bring to you photographs of the work of Louis Rosemond. You can find his work online if you look for it. Actually, it's Rosemond, R-O-S-E-M-O-N-D. You can find him online. Go Google him. For those of you watching us in Miami, Fort Lauderdale, Boca, Palm Beach, Orlando, Tampa, St. Pete, Clearwater, he lives somewhere in Florida. Last I knew, he lived in Fort Lauderdale. I have spoken with gallery owners who handled his artwork, and they haven't seen him in a while. So if any of you know how I can contact Louis Rosemond, I would love to reconnect with him. And you can post it if you go to sabrams.com and you click on Ask Stephanie. That'll take you over to the forums where you can scroll down to Ask Stephanie, and you'll have to register with a username and password, but that'll give you the ability to write, and please contact me. There's also another place to click to contact me somewhere there. Go look. And let's see if we can find him. Louis Roseman is a man I met on a train, and I like to think of this experience under the umbrella stranger on a train. I've met wonderful people and had fabulous experiences on trains, particularly in the US, because I do a lot more train travel in the US than I have done elsewhere in the world, although that's been a prime experience for me. You have such a wonderful opportunity to see the places you're coming through rather than just flying above the clouds. And you have time to find yourself. Those thoughts you can't finish in the same day, you can finish on a train. And those books that you wanted to catch up with, what a great time to crawl into one of those and enjoy the experience. Just after 9/11, I fell into the same category as so many of the people who became radio listeners when I went on the air for the first time, July 7, 2002. Before I was on radio in 2001, I was in Florida in November of 2001, and I didn't want to fly. So we took Amtrak from Newark Amtrak station down to Miami. And we were returning home, so we'd be home for Thanksgiving on the 20th of November, 2001. We got on in Miami, and we got all cozy settled in our seats. And you know, cozy settled? Seats in a train, in an Amtrak train anyway, are the width and the pitch, the distance from your knee to the seat in front of you, as you typically find in first class travel. So you can go in coach on a train and have the spaciousness that you'd have in first class on an airplane, and you have the benefit of being able to actually get up and walk around, because when your doctor tells you, even if you're on a 2 or 3 hour flight, get up, walk in the aisles, ask your doctor, when's the last time you've been in a plane? If you're trying to walk in the aisles, not gonna work. The aisles are too little and there's somebody with a cart in the middle. So I want to tell you about Louis Rosemond, who got on the train that I was on the 20th of November 2001 and sat down behind me. It's a fascinating story. We'll be right back. Stay with me. We'll be right back. If you've just joined us, I didn't want to fly on November 20th, 2001, because I was, like so many, still reacting to 9/11. But I will tell you, I got over it pretty quick. And when we did start traveling again in the spring of 2002 by air, and when I went on radio for the first time, with Travel with Stephanie Abrams in July of 2002, one of the messages I had for my audiences was that those of you who are not traveling are creating the most amazing bargains for those of us who are willing to travel. Because by the laws of supply and demand, people aren't traveling, prices go down. So we reap the benefits. And I can remember 2 years later on radio saying to my audiences who were then just starting, everybody was starting to travel again in 2003, 2004. Look at all you missed. The vacations you didn't take, the Christmases you didn't spend with people, the holidays that you didn't do what you always do in other years because you weren't going to get in an airplane and that was the only way to do what would need to be done. Silly. Silly also from the point of view, I'm sure no matter where you are in the country, oh, look what we've had. fires and mudslides in California, floods along the southern tier of the US, hurricane damage, and look what happened in Puerto Rico, the US Virgin Islands. And in spite of all of that, we'll be talking later today a little bit about the Florida Keys, where so much of Florida, we saw all these horrible, horrible reports, and yet within a week or two of all that damage, I was interviewing hoteliers where they had no damage. They lost a couple of palm trees, or some of the shrubbery went, but everything was perfect. Even a hotel on Ocean Drive in South Beach, Florida, that's this far away from the sand, they were up and operating in 3 days. And the reason that they were out for 3 days is that people evacuated to other places and they had to get their staff back. So when we talk about alternatives to travel, I too got swept up in that, and I decided, because I love travel by train anyway, this is a good time for us to go to Florida on the train. And we're coming back on the 20th of November, 2001. And we got on in Miami, headed for Newark, New Jersey, and we stopped in Fort Lauderdale, and a gentleman got on the train, and he sat down right behind me. And the conductor came by to take his ticket, and there was a little interaction between him and the conductor. And I turned around and sat on my knees, facing him on the seat behind me. And I said, I heard him, he spoke English. But I heard his accent. And I said, monsieur, vous parlez français? Est-ce que vous êtes haïtien? That was my first guess. He could have been from Martinique, he could have been from Guadeloupe, he could have been from somewhere in France. Because I detected that French accent, but I had to guess that maybe he was Haitian. And it turned out that he was. And over the next 19 or 20 hours, when we weren't napping, Louis, Rosemond, and I got to be good friends, strangers on a train. And in the course of talking with him about everything, starting with the fact we were both on the train, and why he was traveling by train, and why was he going to New York, carrying a very big black artist portfolio. I'm talking big, 5 feet maybe. Oh, couldn't have been. Could it have been 5 feet? Could have been. It was big, big thing with a handle. With his artwork in it, he was going to New York for a meeting. And much of his art is bought for office buildings, hotel lobbies. And he took out a little envelope and showed me photos of his work. And I knew I was in the presence of greatness. So many of the people of the Caribbean are incredibly creative, incredibly talented artists, musicians, dancers, writers, thinkers, cooks. Caribbean food, yum. And every island with a different influence. And before we got to Newark, where we were getting off, he was going into New York City's Penn Station with Amtrak. Before we got to Newark, I said to him, Louis, oh, by the way, his English was not fabulous, so we spoke in French the entire time on the train. But I asked him if he would draw me a picture as a souvenir of our meeting. And now I'm going to try to do a little creative movement here so you can see what he drew for me. First of all, I was traveling with this little book. And you can see it's quite old at this point. Well, this is actually the cover. The back cover is gone, and now I've lost his work. Wait a minute, here we are. So I gave him what I had. Paper, a red pen, a pen, ballpoint pens, one that wrote red, black, a highlighter that was yellow until you can see it's running out of yellow. And he went to town drawing me pictures, and I'm gonna try to do this little maneuver so that we can make this happen, not too clumsily. I'm gonna have microphone, we'll travel. Come on, microphone, we're going for a walk. Okay, so let me put this here, and let me get my fingers out of the way. Can you see the picture? You in the control room, can you see the picture?
Yes.
Yes, you can, that's good, okay. So which picture is this? Okay, well you can see, you know, his style, his actual work is very colorful. Lots of primary colors, lots of green, and very much reflective of Haiti and the Caribbean. And so you, in all of his work, not just what he did for me, and you can see 11/20/2001, there's a zero missing, but well, that's okay. Louis Rosemont, and there's a person hiding in the foliage. I think that's a pineapple. These are people. Can you see those people? See faces and hats? And the barely visible highlighter. Look at that. Can you see this work? Again, all of the Caribbean influences. I asked him for one picture. Would you make me a picture that I can have as a souvenir to remember you? And interestingly, in French, the word souvenir means to remember. Foliage, vegetation. Elephants. A little Caribbean house. Lots of foliage. Ah, sailboats. The generosity of time. So sweet of him. And he just plowed along. This is one of my favorites. I don't know if that's a donkey or a zebra. I think it's a zebra. I used to have a weed in my garden that looked like this, like big elephant ear leaves. Look at this one with the horses. Oh, that must have been a horse. Although he did do a couple of paintings that were in the photographs he gave to me as a present. And I put in such a safe place that I can't tell you where it is, but I'm going to turn my house upside down and find them so I can share them with you. But, you know, if you're interested in him, and I hope this isn't sliding at a bad angle for you to see. I know I'm moving it all over, forgive me. Look at the horses. Almost looks like a unicorn, but it's not. It goes on for pages. Oops, I think we missed one. Let's go back. Stuck together pages. Yeah. More stuck together pages. I just find the whole thing, you know, it was such a wonderful experience. And so when I hear people talk about nations of people with a broad brush, it makes me know that they probably never met anybody and really knew them from that destination, or they'd have a tough time saying that. It's something my son learned and shared with his 5th grade class when he was just a boy. And the textbook said something about a place we had actually visited with our children. And he gleefully came home from school to tell me the story that he had to explain to the class and his teacher that what was in that book is not the way it is because he was there. He visited that place, he met people there, and this just isn't right. That, my friends, is a great piece of what travel is all about. And we're going to explore the world together on Travel TV with Stephanie Abrams in weeks to come. So come back next week. Gotta fly now. So good to spend this hour with you. Come back next week. We'll go somewhere wonderful and talk about great travel tips to make your travels wonderful so you can travel richly. This is Stephanie Abrams.
Thank you.